Okay, we've been talking about innovation at these summits for years and years. I feel like I've just stepped back into the future. We're on the beginning of all these things that we've been talking about are on our doorstep and happening right now. So this is going to be an exciting panel. So Vas, I wanted to start with you at Novartis. You're somebody with a passion for public policy, public health policy, as well as running a major pharmaceutical company. You talk about reimagining medicine. What does that mean?
You know, as a physician, it's been extraordinary to see the speed of innovation now we see in our sector. If you go back 100 years, we used to think of medicines as chemicals, and these chemicals, of course, led to dramatic improvements in life expectancy. We moved to large molecules in the 1980s and 90s, antibodies. Now suddenly we're in a world where we can start to think about therapies where we take cells out of your own body, reprogram themselves, put them back in, and maybe cure your or your child's cancer. Gene therapies where we can correct elements of the genome that have gone wrong. And what makes me really excited is it creates the opportunity to say, look, we were able to bring life expectancy up from 25, 30 years of life 100 years ago to now 70, 80, 90, depending on where in the world you live. And now we can live in a world where we even take on some of the greatest challenges, like cancer, like genetic diseases, hopefully Alzheimer's. So I think each one of these eras has led to an opening of more possibilities. And right now with cell therapies, gene therapies, and digital as well, and AI, I think it's opening up a whole new...
So let's drill down on this just a bit. Let's just take AI. Where in medicine is that helpful, and how is it helpful, and where is it less helpful?
You know, I see a few stages for how AI is going to transform how we find and get medicines to people. First, from an operational standpoint, it's clearly the doors are wide open. How we run our clinical trials, how we find patients, how we engage with patients. This is here and now. And that I see as an immediate impact on how we can speed up finding new medicines. Then there's the whole world of can we actually understand human biology? And there I have a bit of humility in the face of how hard it is to find a drug. When you think about it, every one of us is made up of about 40 trillion cells. Every one of those cells has 1 trillion molecules. So the complexity is staggering. AI is going to help us, but first we have to get great data sets, organize that data. So it's going to be a long journey. I think we have to go on it, but it's not going to be overnight.
So David Abney, CEO of UPS, something that is overnight, and I know you are... Yeah. That's actually not what I meant, but that's a good one. We've been talking about drones for years, and you have the first FAA commercial license to use drones. Tell us about that and how that's going to change our lives.
I will. Well, we're in the middle of a digital transformation. We saw a few years ago what technology was going to allow us to do and how it was going to change our industry. We had to make a quick choice. Do we want to be on the leading edge of that, or do we want to let others kind of take it over and then we try to catch up? So obviously the answer was to really act like an entrepreneurial company and really focus on what we think we do best. And we knew to have our first drone airline, which we call UPS Flight Forward, that we were going to have to work very closely with the FAA. We are an airline. We know their processes, their language, their procedures, their expectations. And we knew we would be competing with some companies that weren't airlines that maybe wouldn't understand that process. So we thought that would work into our advantage. So we were the first one to get the certification, and now we have to make sure that we're the first one to scale in a rapid way. So that's the next step of this.
Okay, I'm going to drill down here. I'm at my house in Washington, D.C. When is that package going to be delivered to my doorstep by drone, and how is that going to happen? Am I going to get hit in the head, or how does that work? Do I have to worry about my dog?
I don't think you do have to worry about that. Obviously, it'll be a step at a time. And at the first step, we're doing controlled deliveries. And these are commercial flights. And we've done well over 1,500 of them already. So this isn't about the future. And so we're picking up, and it's samples, and it's in healthcare, and it would be samples and blood tests and urine tests and stuff like that. And pick it up from one part of a healthcare complex, some of these are just enormous, and take it to where it's analyzed in the other. And so you have landing zones back and forth, and you're landing on the ground and doing this. And then, but we're also experimenting, and we're doing tests with actual residential deliveries, which is what you're talking about.
Backstage, you promised me a year away.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, when I said a year away, I wasn't talking about to your house. I was saying, or she is good. What I was saying, it's going to take the FAA probably a year or so to finish the regulations on how we would do this. In the test residential deliveries that we've already done, and it's from one of our customers, a CVS drugstore, to a retirement village or to an individual house, is you'd have the drone that would pick up the shipment at a landing zone at the CVS, then hover within about 20 feet. I was going to point at the lights, but the lights at this place are a lot higher than 20 feet. But hover 20 feet, a tether will come down and has come down, and the package is released on the ground, and then the tether releases. Very quickly, the tether would just be withdrawn back into the drone. That's to avoid hitting someone on the head, landing on someone's dog. This tether would be a very slow, controlled delivery. And then the only way it would hit you in the head is you'd have to dive under it. I don't think you would do that.
Okay.
So, one of the things David and I were talking about backstage is how actually these drones are helping us also reimagine access to medicines. Both of us work with a company called Zipline in Africa, which is now really transforming how medicines are delivered in Rwanda and Ghana to people who can't access the medicines. And it's happening at scale. I was there in Ghana last week, and there are entire regions of the country that get their medicines now entirely through drone delivery, through parachutes. And we're working with the country to tackle a disease like sickle cell disease using this drone technology. But it's extraordinary to see how it's happening so quickly and tackling some of the big healthcare challenges the world faces.
Where else are we going to see it? I'm sorry, in the developing world, and where else are we going to see that?
I think it'll spread. Their ambition is to move across Africa and Southeast Asia, India as well, and rural parts of India. But I think it shows that these problems that we've been struggling with I worked as a public health physician in these places long ago. The challenges we've been facing for decades can now be overcome really quickly by drone tech, and not just the drone technology, it's all the data science behind that. You know where every medicine has gone, you know the inventory across the entire supply chain, you know, did the medicine actually get to the clinic instead of was it lost in the distribution chain? There's a lot of power to this technology to address some pretty big problems.
And what it's really focused on is really time-sensitive, urgent deliveries. So I'm not one that believes that anytime in the near future that paper towels and napkins are going to be delivered by drones to everybody's houses, where we're going to have 100,000
So
of
much
these
for my dinner party.
competing for each other. But you think about a very customized drug that is real expensive in some cases, but it's time sensitive, and the patient needs that immediately. That's where we see the first uses. That's why we concentrated on healthcare and life sciences, and then it will continue to spread out. What we also see is a combination of the UPS package car, and we've already tested this too, so again, it's not future. And we have a docking station at the top of the car, and multiple drones will be dispatched from the package car as the driver's making their deliveries and maybe doing the more rural routes and coming back. So it'll be a combination of our drivers and technology. So there's a lot of uses for it.
So you think this is going to transform public health in developing countries?
I think I think it has the potential to really support getting access to medicines, particularly the next wave of innovative medicines, which is, I think our goal has to be moving away from older medicines or medicines just from infectious disease to chronic diseases as well. And I think getting this kind of resupply chain will really help. I also think it could be very important when we think about expanding these personalized therapies where the shipment really matters. I mean, when you think about when we take on cancer in a child with our cell therapy, we're taking cells from that child, we're reprogramming those cells, we're sending them back. That shipment has to make it. It has to make it on time because the child's life hangs in the balance. And we know 90% of the time we can hopefully achieve a cure. So it shows why two companies like ours need to work hand in hand to make sure these technologies, like our medicines, get to patients who need them.
So please get your questions ready to join in this fascinating conversation. Vas, and I wanted to ask both of you this, but let me start with you. Collecting enough data for AI to have an impact on, say, cell therapy, that requires a lot of personal information. You talk about personal therapies. We're talking about personal information. And that's colliding, I imagine, with data privacy concerns. How do you think about that?
I think we're entering a whole new world now, given the potential for human data and clinical data and laboratory data to help us, of course, treat patients better, find new patient populations, as we discussed earlier, find new drugs. I think companies have to put very transparently how are they going to use the data. We have 500 clinical trials ongoing at any given point in time. We've made a commitment to always keep only anonymized data in our own data lakes, that we only use those data sets in ways that we've had informed consent. So we take a pretty strict view. The challenge, of course, is, as you've seen in recent press coverage, that there are companies that take a very broad view of how to use human patient data, including de-identified data, which of course opens up a whole set of ethical questions. When you can actually link the diagnosis to the identity of the patient, that changes the whole ballgame. I think we probably will eventually have a world where we have global standards put in place around how this data can and can't be used. But for now, I think it's incumbent on companies to put out their policies and really build trust, because the worst thing that would happen is we just have a shutdown of how data flows. Then I think medical innovation would really slow down.
David?
Yes, AI for us, it's the same thing. We deliver 20 million packages a day. So think about all the data that we collect. And we follow the same policy, by the way, and we certainly don't mine this data and turn it over to others. But it allows us to be so much more effective in our planning and in our routing. And we have 125,000 drivers. It's how you route those drivers that can be so important. And through this system, which is called Orion, we're able to make decisions that are much more than the human mind could ever do on a day-to-day basis. So we'll go to a route where one of our outstanding drivers has been delivering for 25 years. The first thing they tell you is you can't improve the way I run this route, right?
Yeah, exactly.
No computer, no system can ever do that. And then we'll go in, and in average, we can take 6 or 7 miles out of a route and give better service at the same time. And with AI, it continues to learn on top of itself, so you're making better and better decisions every day.
I love that example. I think for companies, the first place to look is within your operations. We now deploy AI managing all our clinical trials, so we find AI predicts the enrollment of our clinical trials and what actions we need to take better than human beings. For finance, for sales and cash flow now, we use AI to predict all of our inline brand sales and cash flow, again, better than humans. Our sales reps, how they spend their day, similar to your drivers, we use AI for that. These are places where the data is really well understood, well curated, you can architect it, and you can build algorithms that pretty clearly show you if you do this, you'll get this result. It gets harder when you want to try to find a new medicine for Alzheimer's disease when we don't even understand the basis of Alzheimer's disease.
Yeah, that's a good point on the neurological diseases, neurobrain, sorry. Questions? Right here. Just identify yourself and make it brief so we can get lots of questions in. Thank you.
Hi, Judy Hess from Copperleaf. You're talking about using AI, and Google was recently using AI to do recruiting. And so they trained up their algorithm, and before you knew it, they were only hiring and interviewing males because that's who they had hired in the past for engineering and STEM jobs. So do you see any biases in using AI, or have you come across that in the AI that you've undertaken so far?
I can start. The bias in AI in medicine is a huge topic. If you have a data set that's predominantly Caucasian and then you try to apply it to other ethnic groups, then you find that there's a lot of missed diagnosis or missed opportunities. So I think I always think about, there's there's the big data and then there's the small data, and you need to kind of have both together and think consciously about what you're doing. And not just blindly apply AI. That's the only way around it at this point in time. In theory, if your data sets are big enough, you can get around some of these problems. I think in clinical data, that tends to be hard because you're working on relatively small data sets. So I think it remains a challenge. The one place I've seen it's not a challenge, though, is in imaging data. So where AI seems to just work better is whether it's an image of a skin lesion, an X-ray, a CT scan, an MRI, where AI just seems to be better than the human eye consistently at finding insights. That's where we see a real power. Other areas, I think your point is a very good one. We have to be cautious about bias in the algorithm.
And David, I'd also ask you to address, as a major employer, how do you see AI impacting the workforce and potentially displacing jobs?
Right. And I'll start with what you were saying, now go right to that, and I'll do it quickly so we can get a lot of questions. But what you pointed out, and this, by the way, is not taking a shot at any company that's had these issues, because I don't know enough about their particular situations. But where it works the best is where you take the data, you take AI, but you also take data mining scientists, people that really understand what we're trying to do, and you make sure that your core values as a company are ingrained in everything you do, and diversity inclusion is certainly there. And so you have to have that as a check all through the process, and it's all those things that are just very personal to us. And when it comes to how AI can affect jobs and people, we have 480,000 employees across the world. They're very important to us. I was a package handler and a driver at one point in time. And so we don't see AI replacing all these jobs. We think it's going to be a combination of jobs and a combination of AI that enables our people to be more effective. The jobs are going to change, and we're going to have to do an excellent job of training people to be able to handle jobs of the future instead of some of the more repetitive jobs that may exist today.
But will your workforce shrink? Will your number of employees shrink to
the key to making sure that doesn't happen is to grow the business at the same time. If you were just going to concentrate on technologies and not using technologies to grow your business, obviously the answer would be the more effective you get, the more that you'd be able to do with less jobs. But if you're growing your business at the same time, which is our focus, we don't believe we will see that effect. So that's one of the big challenges.
What about sustainability? Obviously, people are very concerned about climate change now. How are you using innovation to improve your company's performance there? I'll start with you, David.
All right. Well, sustainability is very important to us. I told you how many trucks we have on the road. We also have about almost 600 planes in the air. So we do emit a lot of carbon. So we've had to take responsibility for that. And we have the largest, for a private company, there may be some government agencies or something, but for a private company, we have the largest alternative fuel fleet in our industry, and there's no silver bullet, so there's not one technology that works. We call it a rolling laboratory. And so we have electric hybrid, hydraulic hybrid, and then all forms of renewable natural gas and liquefied natural gas and all these different areas. And our goal is by 2025, it's coming quickly, right? 2025, that we will reduce absolute greenhouse gas emissions by 12%, and also and that's with growing the business at the same time, so absolute, not relative. And then the second part of that is that 40% of the fuel that we burn in our ground fleet would be some kind of alternative fuel, and so moving away further and further from diesel and gasoline. So it's something that we're taking very seriously.
You know, on our side, first I have a reflection that as your workforce becomes more and more millennial, this becomes so fundamental, I think, for motivating the workforce. That's one striking thing I've observed in the role. I mean, we've taken the route of trying to create some very hard targets, a very different business model than David's, but we've set targets of scope 1 and 2 to be completely carbon neutral by 2025, and then scope 1, 2, and 3, 50% by 2030. Similar reductions in water and waste. We committed to be gender equal in management as well within 5 years. We signed up for LGBTI workforce standards. So what we've tried to do is say in every major area, let's give ourselves a hard target and let's track ourselves and whether or not we get there. And we plan to actually publicly publish our scorecards as well to create accountability around these areas.
So as we finish up, I want you each to give me one surprise innovation you see coming out in the near future. Vas?
One surprise innovation I see coming out in the new future. I think we will get to a point where we can use so-called CRISPR technology to edit cells to take on and hopefully cure a whole range of diseases, whether those are things like sickle cell disease or other hemoglobin-based diseases or other things. I see now our ability to do that has improved so much. It's just a matter of time till we can really create a sustainable pipeline of cures.
David?
I think that with technologies that are going to be continuing rolling out, that time is not going to be near the variable that it has been through the future. You know, with Hyperloop technologies, with the airlines that I believe are really going to design much quicker planes, and with the availability of drones that are not going to only move packages but move people. You take that, and with AI and all the combinations of things, time is just not going to be the factor that it has been over the years. Things that used to take weeks that are now becoming days are going to become hours, and it's going to continue to shrink, and it will just affect basically every aspect of our life. So it's going to be very exciting, something to really look forward to.
Fascinating and transformative. Thank you both for taking us into the future
Thank
with
you all very much.
fascinating stuff. Thank you so much.
Thank you.